trust one well-chosen detail to do the work of 10. Walter Murch.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Hull.
And I'm Lee Esses.
And I'm really excited for this particular episode because I love breaking this rule. The rule that we're going to be talking about today is avoid detailed descriptions. It is kind of similar to what we talked about in last episode because a lot of the darlings that we were told to kill come out in detailed descriptions of world building. And if you know anything about me, I love world building and I love describing that world building. Really what we're talking about with this rule of avoiding detailed descriptions is taking more time to describe it to the audience than the character is taking to experience it. Whatever that moment is. Looking at you, Tolkien.
Yeah, if we're spending an hour and a half studying a tree, hopefully we're a botanist and this is an alien planet.
So obviously, there is a reason why this rule exists. And it is probably from authors like Tolkien who spent so much time telling us the details, the really intense descriptive details of their book. The biggest problem with these vast descriptions is that it can ruin the rhythm of any moment. It can ruin the drive. It's like slamming the brakes when you're driving 60 miles an hour. It is jarring and painful.
If your main character wakes up just before sunrise to a phone call that is a ransom note for their child, please do not spend any time describing the sunrise.
The character's not paying attention to the sunrise in that moment.
Another reason why this rule is there is that detailed descriptions are boring. We talked about some of this in the Show Don't Tell episode earlier this month of if you're giving too much information without emotional context attached to it, then we are not going to be interested. It's going to feel like homework. Detailed descriptions are huge criminals in this particular category.
And another reason this rule exists is because it actually encapsulates a lot of other very breakable rules. Show, don't tell, don't use adverbs, don't go over word count. By trimming down your descriptions, you can avoid breaking all of the rest of these rules because you're not spending too much time in the weeds of description.
I will also say, the moment that I decide to put a book down, 98% of the time it's because I'm bored. And that boringness comes not during dialogue, not during a fight scene, not during an emotional moment. It comes during the descriptions. It's almost never at the beginning of a chapter. It's in the middle of that moment where you're spending 6 hours on a tree.
I really like detailed descriptions. I love beautiful scenery and descriptions and stuff like that. I really like description when it is connected to the people who are living in the moment in that book. So this rule really helps you choose the details correctly. Choose which details you're going to go into wisely. So you don't go overly detailed for no reason. When you do get detailed, you do it for a purpose that serves the story, that serves the characters or whatever. But it's really easy to go too far, which is, I think, why a lot of people just say, don't get into too detailed description at all because you don't know how to do it right now.
Just like we talk about with world building, every moment where you're introducing a scene-setting amount of detail in the world, in these descriptions, the iceberg theory is going to serve you well. Choose just those couple of lines that can imply the rest of it.
More than anything, you have to take into consideration your audience expectations. Lee and I have very different expectations about descriptions in our books. And that is because we are very different readers. I read mostly fantasy, long, chunky books full of description, full of interesting descriptions of worlds. Lee mostly reads action, things that are jam-packed with progression in plot.
This kind of information overload, the tolerance will change depending on genre, but there is a limit even for fantasy readers.
Sometimes, if there's too much description about a tree or a forest or people walking forever, your readers will skip longer paragraphs. They'll jump around and look for, okay, what's actually interesting. I actually ran into a book recently. Instead of jumping in time to the after and showing us in the life progression, she showed us the return home and I have enough to buy this building. I have enough to renovate it. I have this. And it just kept jumping and it was too much. And I was like, when is this book going to end? So I skipped over the last couple of chapters of this book. Okay, that's enough.
Another thing to really keep in mind is what my friend calls this bank account theory. Readers are trusting you. They are trusting you to deliver on a promise. The promise that the marketing gave them, the promise that the cover, the blurb on the back gave them. Every time you are giving an ultra long description, you are withdrawing from that bank account. You are lessening their trust in you just a little bit. How much that bank account has will vary depending on how attached the reader is to you. Those good moments, the ones that are really juicy, the ones that really pay off, the reason why we read, those ones will add to the bank account. So as you add to it throughout your story, you have a little more permission to withdraw with these super long descriptions. But every time you put one of those in, you're risking someone putting the book down.
Obviously, if it hasn't been clear, I like detailed descriptions. I like scene setting. So I really encourage you to break this rule. But break it correctly, please.
If you are boring us, if you are telling children's stories and trying to put Christopher Tolkien to sleep, sure, long detailed descriptions puts us all to sleep. For the rest of us, make sure that that information is plot relevant. If you're describing the intricacies of this gorgeous historical sword, then later on, give the character a false look-alike sword. This isn't the real thing, they've replaced it with a fake, I can tell because it's emeralds instead of rubies in the hilt. Whatever. Making that detailed information plot relevant helps the investment in that information pay off, and it helps the reader feel like it was worth it to read the thing.
Even if it's not directly plot related, you can make it character related. Give us these descriptions through the eyes of the character who is experiencing them. How are they emotionally connected to whatever it is that they are seeing, that they are experiencing? That's how you make it relevant. Because, when we say it all the time, the details, when they are placed correctly, help immerse the reader. Especially when you are writing sci-fi or fantasy and you have a very unearth-like world, the reader needs those details to help them feel part of the world, to really get in and experience it and have an anchor to what they are living and experiencing. Without description in Brandon Sanderson books, you would have no idea that Roshar looks so different than Earth. But because of the descriptions used in correct places and connected to plot or character, we get to see and experience these deep chasms in the ground where it looks like the earth was shattered by gods.
Another great way to break this rule is if you are actually kind of intentionally trying to briefly bore the reader. Something like seeing a scene from Sherlock Holmes' point of view. He's noticing all of these details and then sorting through which ones are relevant, which ones aren't. That can be a boring bit of information that you're setting up for faster repetitions of that moment later on.
You can also get away with this if you make it simply part of your writing style. If you intend to write a slower paced story, that works. The cozy fantasy genre is big right now, and it is full of beautiful, rich description because the whole plot is slowed down. It takes its time to get through because it's a nice, cozy story without very high stakes. And that's okay if you make it part of the style that your readers are going to expect.
Another part of this style, which could be just that particular book instead of your entire writing style, would be inserting slow-mo moments. If you've seen the first Deadpool movie, you know how that opening sequence works. You have to use that more than in just one scene in your writing. Overly detailed descriptions of a thing will stretch time. When you have these slow-mo moments, you have to set them up well and use a lot of short sentences. You can say something at the beginning of the paragraph like, then several things happened all at once. This, and this. Therefore, we've stretched out that moment across an entire paragraph, but we also recognize it takes place in the character's point of view in the span of a split second.
For you as the author, if you take nothing else from this episode, what you need to understand is your audience, their expectation, because that, more than anything, will determine how much you can break this rule.
Some readers need that kind of description in order to feel immersed in the story. Some readers get really annoyed at any attempt to be floral or poetic with your storytelling. They want to get to the good part as quickly as possible. Understanding your readers is pivotal for understanding which detailed descriptions can stay, which ones can go, and which ones just need to be pared down.
Whatever you decide to do, however you decide to include descriptions in your story, whether you keep them short, keep them long, make sure that you are setting your readers up to understand that's what they're getting. But you can only get there if you
write selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.